Theme 66: The Cultural Dimension of English in the World Nowadays. British and American English. The Presence of the English Language in Spain. Anglicisms. Index. 1. Introduction. 2. Relation with other themes. 3. Current legislation. 4. The English language in the world. 5. Necessity of learning English in today's world. 6. Influences in English in different fields. 7. British and American English differences, pronunciation, grammar, lexis, and spelling. 8. The English language in Spain, Anglicisms. 9. Conclusion applicable to language teaching. 10. Relevant bibliography. The theme I have chosen to write about is number 66, which deals with the cultural dimension of the English language in the world nowadays. In the first place, I will talk about the presence of the English language in the world, and then mention the main differences that exist between the two principal forms of English, British and American. I will then go on to talk about the presence of English in Spain, making special reference to the use of Anglicisms. I will finish with a conclusion related to some thoughts on how best to approach the teaching and learning of all these aspects in our secondary school classes. This theme is directly related to many others, as it deals with different aspects of culture, vocabulary, grammar, phonetics, and phonology. The new improved Organic Law of Education, the LOMLOE, came into force in 2021 and has now been introduced in secondary education. The law deals comprehensively with the most suitable type of methodology to be implemented in our secondary school classes. The official curriculum of the Autonomous Region of Madrid contains detailed information about the introduction of all these points during the different stages of compulsory secondary education and bachillerato. All of this is established and supported by the Council of Europe in the Common European Framework of Reference for Languages. I will begin my theme by talking about the presence of the English language in the world. It is obvious that the English language exercises a great influence on the world nowadays. The relationship between a language and the people who speak it is so intimate that they cannot be separated. English, or any other language such as French or German, is important because the people who speak it are important in some way, politically, economically, or culturally, and therefore the language is studied outside the country where it is spoken. If we ask people why they learn English, we may obtain very different answers. It may be because it is in the school curriculum, or because they seek promotion in their professional lives as it has become the international language of communication. It could be that they feel attracted by the culture, but the real thing is that the necessity of knowing some English is increasing day by day for the reasons mentioned above, and some others, such as reading for pleasure, and that it may become unuseful when traveling abroad. There are many reasons why English has expanded so widely. It could be due to some things like the expansion of the British Empire in the past, the growth of the industry, or developments in science and literature. What is certain is that from the 17th century onwards, England expanded its territory all over the world. It began to acquire colonies in North America and India in the 17th century. In the 18th century, it was in Australia and New Zealand, and in the 19th century in Africa. So, people in all these places have been speaking English since then. Some of these countries, like New Zealand, Australia, and the United States, have English as their native language, but others, such as India, use it as a second language, as their lingua franca. What is a lingua franca? It is based again on political, economic, and demographic criteria. It has nothing to do with the ease or difficulty or any other linguistic characteristic, but it is a language which serves to put different people with different languages into contact, for them to understand each other. In the case of English, it is often used as a lingua franca within a country, for instance in Africa, where it is used as the principal means of communication. They depend on English for their law courts, parliament, and most of their business world. English is spoken by hundreds of millions of people as their first language in countries such as the UK, the USA, Australia, and the former British colonies, and is the most widely spoken of the Western languages. Hundreds of terms are created every year to face the continuous development of science, technology, and culture. Many of these words are later adopted by other languages with little or no change at all. In some cases, they are adopted to supply the missing terms, but in others, they remain unchanged. English influences politics a great deal because the USA and the UK are politically strong forces. They are two countries whose scientific and economic development has always been followed by other countries. They are also present in international organizations such as the United Nations and NATO, with the USA being the most powerful member. Governments have not been slow to realize the importance of English. Many countries have their own English language radio programs beamed all over the world, and newspapers in English are available practically everywhere. In the field of economy, English, as we all know, is in many areas a top requirement for those seeking a good job. It primarily involves writing and speaking, two necessary skills, among others, for success in the business world, especially if you work with a foreign company to whom you have to sell products. We can see in Spain that many newspapers often publish advertisements in English for jobs either here or abroad, and we find an increasing number of teenagers and adults studying English during the school year and also during their summer holidays either in England, if they can afford it, or in Spanish camps or schools with an English environment. There are also companies which provide their workers with free courses to learn or to improve their knowledge of English. As far as culture is concerned, all of us will have seen one of those serials or comedies on TV which tell us all about the American or British way of life. Today, with the boom of satellite television, we have direct access to many British or American channels, from CNN and Sky News to MTV. It is true that even when a film or a TV program is dubbed for foreign screening, there remains a good deal of passive American or British culture and way of life, which viewers can perceive often without their realizing it. There are newspapers and magazines published in English all over the world, and this is also a means of conveying culture. This field of culture is inevitably related to the economic field because all kinds of TV programs or music are sold and bought like any other product. So, in a sense, we commercialize with culture. It is also important to mention the great number of Spanish students at American and British universities. When they return home, apart from bringing their degree, they also bring with them the new language and a different way of life. In the field of science, English is almost essential. A high percentage of the research books are written in English, and it saves a great deal of time and money if you have direct access to that language. People working in this field often need to travel abroad where important research is being carried out, so they need the language to communicate with other people without intermediaries. They may also go to foreign universities to give lectures or even to work or do research there, in which case English is very useful, if not totally essential. For the following part of my theme, I will mention the main linguistic, sociolinguistic, and pragmatic differences between British and American English. These two varieties of English have changed a good deal in the last 300 years or so, and they have not developed in exactly the same way. However, the differences between them are not that great. Most British and American speakers can understand each other quite easily, though pronunciation can cause a few problems. The most important differences between Standard American and Standard British speech are that stressed vowels are often more lengthened in American English than in British English. Certain vowels are pronounced slightly differently in British and American English, but some of them are very different. A British speaker would say top, whereas an American speaker would say top. The diphthong O, as in home, also sounds different. A British speaker would say home, whereas an American speaker would say home. Many British people pronounce a instead of a, which is what an American would say. In this respect, a British person would say fast and glass, whereas an American speaker would say fast and glass. In standard British English, R is only pronounced before a vowel. In American English, however, R is pronounced in all positions in a word. Therefore, a British person would say car or offer, whereas an American speaker would say something like car or offer. In American English, T and D both have a very light voice pronunciation between vowels. So, writer and rider would sound the same, like rider. Also, before U and EW, British people pronounce a semi-vowel. So a British speaker would say YouTube, whereas an American speaker would say YouTube. Finally, there are other different pronunciations of isolated words, such as the British Ida or the American either. There are a few differences as far as grammar is concerned. In American English, the simple past is often used to announce a recent happening, whereas in British English, the present perfect is used. Therefore, Americans would say, he just went home, instead of he has just gone home. In American English, the forms I don't have or do you have are more usual than I haven't got and have you got. Thus, we would tend to hear, do you have a problem? And not, have you got a problem? Incidentally, in American English, the past participle of got is gotten. In telephone conversations in American English, this is used by the speaker when referring to the hearer, whereas in British English, this is used by the speaker when referring to himself and that referring to the hearer. Americans tend to say, "Hello, is this Peter?" Whereas a British speaker would use, "Hello, is that Peter? This is Paula." In informal speech, Americans sometimes use adverb forms without ly. The sentence, "He looked at me really strangely," would be, "He looked at me real strange." There are small differences in the use of prepositions and adverb particles. Americans meet with somebody and wait on someone. They may work from Monday through Friday and stay home on the weekend. Most differences between the two variations of English are in the lexical field. Sometimes the same word exists in both varieties, but with a different meaning. While mad means crazy in Britain, it signifies angry for an American. Quite often, there are different words for the same idea. In New York, you would travel by cab, railroad, or subway, whereas in London, you would go by taxi, railway, or underground. Instead of taking the lift to his flat, an American would go up the elevator to his apartment. He would eat candy, cookies, or French fries, and not sweets, biscuits, or chips. His preferred clothes might be pants and sneakers instead of the British trousers and trainers. Some differences can actually produce embarrassing misunderstandings. Words like fag and fanny had completely different meanings in America and Britain. I will briefly mention a few spelling differences between these two types of English. Some endings differ, although this does not usually affect the pronunciation. Words like color are spelled without a U in American English. British words that end in RE are spelled ER in American English, as in theater. The verbal suffix ise is spelled ize in words like realize or organize. Apart from these, there are also some differences in the individual words. For example, defense is spelled with a C in Britain and with an S in America. The final ME is dropped in words like program. In fact, many American spellings tend to have a more sensible correspondence with their pronunciation, giving us check terminating in CK instead of the British check terminating in QUE. I will now write about the presence of English loanwords in Spanish. The number of Anglicisms in common everyday use in Spain runs into the thousands. The early loans date from the 18th century, but it has been during the past 50 years or so when the greatest flood of Anglicisms has poured into our language. This has mainly been due to the influence of the USA and through various channels, the mass media, TV, radio, newspapers, the internet, fashion, science, and technology. Anglicisms can affect different fields. For example, many products are known by their English name, as we can see with Ferry and Colgate. In the field of economy, many terms like marketing or broker have been introduced. Words like on, off, play, or stop are found on all sorts of electrical appliances. In the world of computers, software and chat are used all the time. Even though Spanish words exist, it is normal to hear corner or basket in sports commentaries. Some of these Anglicisms have been adapted to Spanish spelling or pronunciation, as is the case of football. Many titles of films are frequently left in the original, either because a great number of people would understand them, or because the translation would lead to an error of meaning, or simply because the title sounds better in English. In everyday life, there are so many Anglicisms used at all times that it is not easy for people to realize that they are not Spanish terms. Words like gangster, ticket, or meeting have tended to adopt a more Spanish spelling, but fashion, feeling, and master are now universally accepted. Before finishing my theme, I would like to mention other non-lexical loans which refer more to attitudes and customs. It has become increasingly customary over the last few years to celebrate St. Valentine's Day or Halloween, and to send Christmas cards. To conclude, it goes without saying that it is vital to deal with cultural aspects in our classes, especially at this stage of our students' learning process. As far as the practical aspects of this theme are concerned, we need to give our students access to the different varieties of English spoken in the world, particularly British and American. By reading different authentic texts and by watching short extracts of British and American films or TV programs, our students will certainly be able to open their minds to this pluricultural society in which we live. Students do need, however, to take care not to overuse many of the unnecessary Anglicisms present in Spanish and to be careful with the phenomenon of false friends, more and more of which exist in our current multilingual world. The bibliography I have used for the information in this theme has basically been the Common European Framework of Reference for Languages, produced by the Council of Europe, and Practical English Usage by Michael Swan. I hope you agree with me that my theme has covered all the necessary points and that it has demonstrated the importance of dealing with cultural awareness and sociocultural aspects in our classes, using up-to-date methodological principles, something which can only be of benefit to our students.